Welcome, everyone. We're excited to see all of our 2026 interns joining us for today's session, and we are super excited to welcome Ashley Scandariato back. Ashley, I apologize if I'm not saying your last name correctly, but Ashley's been a real friend of the program and has participated in this session for, I guess this is year 3 or year 4?
I think four, right?
Yeah, I think so too. We just keep rolling by. So Ashley joins us as she's a corporate talent acquisition manager or human resources partner. Ashley brings over 15 years of experience in corporate human resources. She has worked in a variety of HR functions, including leadership, talent acquisition and mobility, employee relations, and also in compensation and training and development in a variety of roles. So Ashley earned her bachelor's degree from Purdue University. She holds a PHR certification from the Human Resources Certificate Institute. Ashley joined FM, where she's currently working now, in January of 2022. And I believe Ashley is joining us from the Rhode Island area, if that
That's
hasn't changed.
right.
Is that correct, Ashley?
That is correct. Yes.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see all of you today. I hope you're doing well. Carolyn, thank you for the introduction. You know me as well as I know myself. Um, I do have to share a safe harbor statement as I'm currently employed by FM. So it's important for me to share that the perspectives and ideas that I'm sharing today are my own and do not belong exclusively to me nor to FM. And they do not intend, of course, to disparage any group, any organization, individual, and should not be construed as an endorsement by any of my affiliated organizations or entities. So that's my legal jargon for the day. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. So if somebody wouldn't mind just giving me a thumbs up when you can see my screen, I would appreciate that. So I know that you guys are all set. Okay. So I wanted to start today's session with a little bit of like an economy lesson as it relates to individuals that are entering the workforce, whether during internships as you continue your education or as entry level talent. So I am absolutely not an economist. However, um, I try to stay really up to date on what's going on in the market because it really does impact talent acquisition in our candidate and applicant pool. So bear with me. And also, please feel free to interrupt if you have questions. I'm happy to field them as we go along our presentation. I'm planning to have some time at the end to answer any questions that you may have. But I want this to be, meaningful for you and beneficial because this is your time. So where we are today, well, before I have you look at that, I think it's important to note we're moving from what HR professionals and generally economists at large call the Great Resignation, so the period after COVID, to what is called the Great Stay. Has anybody heard that phrase before, the Great Stay? Okay. So 3 years ago, we had 2 job postings to every 1 applicant in the US economy. Now we're 1 for 1. So we have 50% less jobs, right? And the people who are actively working today in the US economy are job hugging. So it's a low fire and a low hire economy, which means people aren't moving. So jobs are not opening as fast as they have in our recent past, and jobs aren't as available as they were in our most recent past. This leads to what we call sometimes like a frozen labor market, which isn't necessarily a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is where we are today. And part of this I think is due largely due to a lot of AI investments. We have tax relief bills that have come into play, lower interest rates from the Fed, things that are trying to boost the economy, but threats in the economy today too. We have war that's happening. We have reduced immigration due to federal policies. We have arguably this AI bubble, which we can't not hear AI a million times, and you will hear it during this presentation because it's our reality. But at some point, there's a lot of investments, and companies need to start seeing a return on those investments with Gen AI. So right here, it's a little bit of an eye chart, but based on the US Census in 2020, 40% of the jobs that we had at that time didn't exist in the 50s. And while 1950 seems forever away, 70 plus years, we know jobs are going to continue to change over time. And so we're seeing disruption in the market and our learning curves based off of the level of our hires. So we're seeing this evidence of generative AI disruption in our talent pools for emerging careers and traditional careers because of Gen AI. And really, the leading indicator that we're seeing so far is a disruption in our entry level hiring across the US. Data is showing a hiring gap growth, and the amount of jobs that hire 22 to 25-year-olds on average is decreasing. So you might fall into that population, you may not, but I think it's important for us to know what we're up against as we go into the labor market or continue to be in that labor market. One more chart about the economy as it relates to AI. What we have seen so far is that in industries that are AI resilient, so this left side, this left pyramid, every level of an employee has started to decrease a little bit. But in industries that have higher AI performance, we're seeing entry level talent hiring needs decrease. So again, I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, but I think it's important for us to know that what was possible for someone in your shoes 3 to 4 years ago is different today, largely because of generative AI and how it's hit. So for example, call center type jobs have dropped 37% from the late 90s when call centers were really very popular. I don't know if any of you have recently called and gotten a bot that answered a phone call or even online. I can give you an example. This past May, I was on a Delta flight. So I was flying to France, and there was a medical emergency on my flight. It was, really difficult, I'm sure, for that passenger, but it was an overnight flight, and the lights were on the entire time. All service in the cabins stopped. You weren't allowed to leave your chair. Nobody slept. I called just to see, what Delta might be willing to offer because of that disruption. And they gave me my money back, right? And I never talked to a person. I talked only to a bot. And that bot was able to handle my concern, look up my flight information, validate the medical emergency, and reimburse me actual money. And so that is a job that belonged to a human before. So, that decrease of 30%, 37% as generative AI continues to develop, we might see increasing. And that's just one area. So, I think helpful for us to think about what those industries are that may be disruptive. Are there any questions about this? Okay. One other thing, I think is important to share just generally across the US economy. In the first quarter of the year, we lost about 100,000 jobs in the market, which is down 14% from the same time the previous year. In addition to that, it was 98,000 jobs, so really close to 100. Additionally, in 2025, temporary employment fell dramatically as well. So 700,000 jobs were impacted. So again, as you start searching for jobs, I think it's important to really identify what you're looking for, why, so that you can make it through that talent cycle. So let's talk about what we do considering we now know all of this. So, in my opinion, preparing for a job search is the absolute hardest part. And so, you have an opportunity now and over this next several months, depending on if you're going back to school or if you're seeking full-time employment, to really think about what I call the 4 Ws that will help lead you to where you want to go. So, it's what do you want to do? Where do you want to do it? Whether it's company specific, industry specific, location specific, why you're excited to do that body of work, and what is your cost? And cost isn't just about money necessarily. Cost can be about opportunity cost if you need to relocate for a company that you're interested in or a general industry and your specific nuances about all of that. For those of you who are interning now, when you think about these 4 Ws and perhaps think about the experience that you're having over the course of the summer, 51% of interns in the US end up going back to apply at the company that they intern for, and 37% of interns at large stay with the same organization if they were an intern hired as full-time for more than 3 years. So that's a good amount of time. 3 years is a lot of time to learn, develop, and grow in your professional experience, and gives you a really nice opportunity to get exposed to that company and the business that they're doing there. Of the US candidate base right now, I think the degree is the most important part of finding a job. However, that's changing, and that's changing with our hiring managers across the Americas region, where skills-based hiring has become even more important. So, let's talk about how you demonstrate what you know and what you have in terms of your skills in your resume. So before I show my next slide, I imagine everybody on this call has a resume, but that's an assumption. Is that a good assumption? Good assumption. Okay, good. Um, If you're willing, can you drop in the chat if you wrote your resume with generative AI, whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, whichever one is your preference or your go-to? Curious just by a general show, who used AI? I see a couple of, oops, sorry, hands raised, but not as many as I expected. Okay. So my belief. And as a person who has looked at well over and interviewed and screened well over 50,000 people in my past, this is your summary. This is your overview for your resume. So at the top of your resume, you're going to want your name, your contact information. Do not have a typo in your contact information. I always recommend, especially this day and age, to exclude your address or to exclude your city and state from your resume. But instead use that line to create a nice summary statement of who you are and what you bring to the role, followed by selected achievements, your education that you have attained, skills, and your experience. So in that order, if you have attained the education that you have been striving for and have gained your first professional full-time role, I actually recommend to swap 4 and 6 so that education is the last thing and your professional experience actually moves up on your resume page. You don't want to have a lot of colors. You don't want a lot of formatting and editing. Most applicant tracking systems today are taking true PDFs, but you want your resume to be very clean, very crisp, and a snapshot or an advertisement of who you are and what you can offer. Generally, I think if you have between less than 7 to 10 years of experience, your resume should be on one page and should not extend further than that. And if it is longer than that, I think you have an opportunity to really look at the content that you have documented with a critical eye of what is this helping someone to understand? I think it's really important for individuals to write evidence about their skills and their experiences rather than a biography. So, what I mean by this is writing generally what you're responsible for, which is generally what a job description has advertised the role to be, is not a demonstration of a strong resume, but instead you want to show what you have accomplished, what your impact was for either your direct team, your leadership team, or your organization at large. Now, some of these examples maybe seem outlandish, but they're things that I see on resumes regularly. And I actually pulled some of this content straight from resumes that I've received in the past from friends when I have helped edit and prepare them when they're seeking employment or their next opportunity. So as a recruiter, I don't want to know that you managed a sales territory. Your job title is going to indicate that to me. But I would like to know how you grew that territory or how you grew your people and what that impact was for the organization. Generally, recruiters aren't super interested in what you're responsible for, but instead what you built, what you led, what you did. Again, think about everything as an impact statement. And since you all already have a resume, I would really encourage you to bring it up, whether it's today during the call, this afternoon, perhaps this weekend, and look at it with this type of framing of, if I'm not answering a question, does it belong on that critical line of my resume? And if your answer is no, you might have an opportunity with your manager, if you're still actively interning or connected, or with a person that you trust, to say, what have I done that changed something while I was here, right? That's an impact statement. And sometimes, as a person in the work, you can't see the forest through the trees, so to speak. So sometimes it's hard to see what impact or what change you made because you're the one living in it day to day, but somebody else, a trusted partner, advisor, manager, mentor, should be able to give you some ideas so you can write that down, think about it, and see how you actually incorporate that into your resume. So today, we have generative AI. Our applicant tracking systems at organizations are smarter than ever. And so you as an applicant should work with technology instead of against technology. Use different platforms to your advantage to make sure the resume that you're submitting matches the company's language they're using. Because I will tell you, generally in the US, I don't want to generalize for the entire globe. There are some restrictions in the EMEA countries, but generally, most applicant tracking systems are matching what you submit based off of the job description that's published and giving recruiters a heads up on how much you match that role, whether it's by the specific requirements, the skills that you've listed, or the outcomes that you have listed on your resume. So, putting your resume, your drafted resume, through a generative AI platform, whatever your preference is something good to do in preparation for the apply process or in advance of an interview. I think oftentimes applicants have the right experience, but your words that you're writing on paper are described differently by each company. And so while I think it's hard to have a specific resume for each time you apply, you can tailor it to start matching what you're seeing generally on job postings, whether it's on LinkedIn or Indeed or specific career websites. The AI tools that are in the software platforms today are matching. So again, you want to use that to your advantage if time permits for you to show up as a better match. Recruiters this day and age are seeing more applicants than they ever have before, partly because of changes in the economy, right? We have 50% less jobs than we did last year, so the same volume of applicants. So we have more people for the same less jobs. And so you want to help use their terminology when truthful so that more time is spent in the review of your application to help you progress through the interview process. A couple more examples in terms of resume writing that I'd like to share. Again, things that I see in my day-to-day. Sorry about this. Let me accept this. Okay, there we go. Um, it's not helpful to see I'm a hard worker. Team player is another thing I see regularly. Detail oriented is another phrase that shows up regularly on resumes. I would encourage you to scan yours, highlight that, whether it's digitally or on paper, where you have these general words. And again, remember and reflect on if you're detail oriented, what was the impact to a project that produced positive results because of that detail orientation, right? If you're a team player, instead of writing, I'm a team player, how did your ability to collaborate support a project executing or delivering faster? Did you meet your deadlines because you were able to cross barriers that others weren't able to, right? So use those descriptions. Don't necessarily strike the lines from your resume, but instead spend some time reviewing what you wrote and understanding intentionally what you want someone to see and understand, and then make your edits accordingly. Recruiters and systems are always searching for results. So the terms that you use do matter. So if the AI is helping a recruiter find the 50 best applicants for a role that's been posted for a week, you want yours to go up because the terminology in your resume is accurately reflecting you and your experience, but also speaking their language. Are there any questions so far about this? Okay. I'm hoping I'm going to set a timer. I would love for everyone to just take a little bit of time and think about one line, one action and impact oriented thing that you have accomplished this summer. I don't want to make anybody feel like they're totally put on the spot, but if you're willing to put it in the chat, thinking about what the impact was, I think it's helpful to share some of those examples as a group and as a community so that you get some ideas for any upcoming resume edits that you might decide you want to make as you're headed back end of the summer. So I'd like to give everybody, say, 30 more seconds. If we have any bold individuals who want to share. Okay. Thank you. So I think there's some great examples in the chat. I'm curious, when you built and managed the Instagram and LinkedIn calendar, what technology did you use that with? Was that you built it yourself? Did you use an AI agent? Was it done in a platform or a system that might be interesting for an organization? might add a little bit more Google Sheets. Yep. Okay. Thank you. It's a great example. Is that on your resume today?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. I help refresh a tutor training program. So, Joyce, on that, I would perhaps recommend adding a little bit more contact. So, um, content, excuse me. So perhaps, and if you have it, and if you don't, you might not be able to add it, but were you able to orient individuals faster? Did they have a more positive experience as measured by some sort of survey that your organization completed? Like, um, great if you have that. If not, it's great that you refresh that program. And I would just really encourage you to be able to speak about what you specifically did and how individuals were positively impacted by that. Production timelines. Okay, so Caitlin, I like what you're adding here. And thank you guys all so much for adding comments here in the chat. I appreciate it. I would be curious, and if I was your interviewer, perhaps would like to know how it was utilized. So if you had Google related metrics to show the usage after your implementation, perhaps immediately and a month or 2 months in, that will help talk to sustainability of the sheet that you built. Hey, that's a lot of landlords. That's great. That's great. All right. Thank you guys so much for sharing. I am going to reshare my screen with all of you. Okay. So this is what I call the 10-second resume test. Has anybody ever done this before? Um, you take your name off. Perhaps you're in a group of individuals. You can pass your resume to each other. You time someone. They have 10 seconds to review your resume. And if in 10 seconds, when you take it back from them or stop sharing your screen with them, that person should be able to tell what you do, what level you're at, what industry you're in, and what makes you a better applicant than the next. What's going to drive them to want to contact you? So, I mean, I know we're all digital right now, but if you're still in your internship or as, you have conversations with your friends, perhaps your siblings, family members, a trusted advisor, I would encourage you to do this exercise with them. And if they're not able to answer their 4 things about their resume, it's probably time to relook at the formatting that you're using and making sure you're able to call attention to those 4 most important things for what a recruiter is going to look for in the first 10 seconds. And 10 seconds is perhaps maybe a scary amount of time to think about. But when you have recruiters and hiring managers who are getting hundreds of applicants every single day for openings that they have, you may only have 10 seconds of a recruiter's time to make an impact for them to make a determination of, yes, I'd like to talk to this person and learn a bit more about them, right? Yes, they look like they're qualified to our base requirements. Now it's time for me to learn a little bit more about what their skills and experiences are to see if I think that they're a fit for this role. So you have 10 seconds to make an impact. So try it out with your friends, your family, anyone who's willing to listen to you. Um, and if you're still in your active internship, I would share your resume with them and ask what they notice first, right? Like physically show it to them and see what they're noticing first. They're looking at resumes constantly. Their feedback will be helpful for you if and as you determine you might have an opportunity to make changes. All right. So my last resume writing slide is cover letters. I'm curious if you guys will raise your hand if any of you have an active cover or interest letter that you share regularly when you do apply to jobs. Okay, I see some hands raised so far. If you asked me 5 years ago if I thought cover letters were the best use of an applicant's time, I would say perhaps, perhaps not, generally not. But I think cover letters are absolutely having a comeback. We're seeing that at work myself. And I think part of it is based off of AI, right? A lot of us, me included, we're updating our content with Gen AI. So we're starting to sound kind of the same, right? Machine learning is learning from each of us. So a well-written, thoughtful cover letter has the ability to make an impact for those human parts of the application. So when someone has read your resume and said, this person meets the requirements, um, if you add your cover letter as part of your application, it helps a recruiter understand your motivation, explain perhaps career changes or your upcoming graduation date and the details aligned with that. It connects your experience perhaps to that specific company's challenges that maybe you've read about in an annual report, their values that you have perhaps learned about from reviewing their resumes, individuals that you know that perhaps work for that company. It makes a human and personal connection. So what we don't want to see is, I'm excited to apply for this role. Please accept my resume as part of that application, right? I mean, I think that's a pretty standard. We've seen that a lot in the past, but it doesn't give that human connection. But if you put interning, like my internship helped me learn these things, that's what drew me to this role. Or you're pulling parts of the job description and adding what your experience, whether it's your education, personal experience, your professional experience, aligns to this. Again, that's making a connection that is better explained in that cover letter than your resume, which is really your advertisement of your skills and qualifications. To me, that second example, the strong example, sounds like a person that sounds like someone that is engaged and interested in my position that I'm advertising in my company. So thinking about, the generally large applicant pool, this person looks interested and excited. I'm more inclined to call, email, or text this person to say, hey, I'm Ashley. I work at this company. I'd like to set up a time to meet with you to discuss the role, right? Which is your whole goal in applying. I think cover letters should be short. Um, I hear people saying TLDR. There's like a commercial that too long, didn't read. Short and sweet works. You want to make that connection. It should not be any longer than 3 paragraphs. Two probably will suffice. And just like your resume, I think if you are going to apply with a cover letter to a role or perhaps send one if you get contacted by a recruiter, I would read it with a keen eye of what is adding value and what is fluff. If you have fluff in your cover letter, cut it out, right? They know you're excited to apply for the role. They know you're generally excited to interview with them. But what they want to know is why you're interested specifically based off of that role. So the goal isn't to trick the system. The goal isn't to trick the recruiter, but instead, as you create or edit these documents, I want you to think about how you, as an applicant and a job seeker, can make it so ridiculously easy. It's my tagline for today for the system, the recruiter, and the hiring manager to see why it is you that they should contact to interview, why it is you that they should select. If it's not easy to see, if it's not easy to look at, and if it's not easy to understand, that 10 seconds is not going to go well. So, recommend do that 10-second test, blind the resume, and really look at each line and make sure everything that you've put pen to paper on is very clear and succinct. So, You have your resume, you have your cover letter, perhaps you got picked to interview. Now, what do you do? I think at this point in time, everybody knows your past behavior is the best predictor of future performance, which is why almost every company recruiter and hiring manager is going to ask you behavioral based interview questions. So, those are questions that say, tell me about a time when this happened and what you did, right? Two-thirds of applicants in the United States today prefer human interaction over AI and chatbots. So you're hoping that your interview generally is going to be with a real person that you can talk to. And some corporations, some companies are doing filming, like through a vendor like HireVue, for example, and I'm not, advertising for them or anything, but recruiters can film themselves and send you questions electronically that you in turn film your responses and send back. But generally speaking, a lot of applicants aren't providing positive experience about that. So I think in preparation, you want to make sure you do these four things, right? Check your socials. Is what is out there on the internet what you would want them to see about you? And if it's not, perhaps you consider editing or checking your privacy settings, and getting that fixed and under control. In terms of socials as well, LinkedIn is a very good networking website. It's a great place to advertise who you are. Again, a lot of my team spend a lot of their day in LinkedIn Recruiter. So you want to make sure you have a presence on socials where it makes sense and impact. Additionally, past 2022, the US market at large has seen a lot of programmatic advertising changes, where corporations are using social media to advertise directly to you, whether it's through TikTok and Instagram, YouTube channels, etc. So, we're using social from a corporate perspective. You should too. So make sure that social matches what you want them to see about you. I'd also recommend each of you practice your 60-second sell. And if you don't have that today, that's something to start thinking about and practicing live for yourself on a recording to see how you're presenting yourself. So that's a laser focus pitched where you talk about you. It's not a biography about you, but instead who you are, what you want, and why, right? In 60 seconds or less, because we are in an attention economy. You don't have a ton of time with people. So you want to say something that catches their attention and makes them want to ask more questions about you. I absolutely believe in recording and watching yourself. As weird as it may seem, technology today has made this so much easier than it is in the past. Film yourself. Watch how you look when you respond to questions or when somebody asks you a question, you have to think about what your answer is. They're watching you, right? Your interviewer is seeing how you respond, and it is your job to prepare so that interviewer sees what you want them to see. Recognizing nobody is perfect, but you might not be aware of verbal fillers that you use. So, for example, like, as examples, you're going to see that when you film yourself, and you can learn to start addressing that. I talk with my hands a lot. I have a big Italian family, and I think we're all known for using our hands. But you might watch that some of your mannerisms or things that you do are, in fact, perhaps distracting from the message that you're trying to deliver. So you will not know that unless you film yourself, watch yourself, and try again. And then finally, use Gen AI. Prep with their prompts. Use whichever your preference is, let's say Copilot, to submit the job description for the role that you applied. If you're selected to interview, ask it to give you behavioral-based questions based off of the description. Share with it the company's website and ask it to scan some questions about the company so that you have prepared and thought through what those answers might be. I think this is a very important part, and this is the part that you really control. So, when thinking about behavioral-based questions and perhaps those Gen AI prompts, When you're actually interviewing, I always recommend for people to practice using the SHARE model. This is a model that helps you answer behavioral-based interviews in a way that really answers the question fully for the recruiter and explains what your role was specifically, what your results were, and if you have the benefit of hindsight, what you might do differently. So your evaluation of what happened and what went well and what you might change. So again, those behavioral based questions are, tell me about a time when you were unable to successfully do this thing. A really good interviewer is going to hear you start explaining the situation, the hindrance, your action. And I want each of you to be prepared that that person is going to interrupt you and hopefully ask you thoughtful questions of, before you tell me about the result, can you tell me a little bit more about the team? You keep saying we instead of I. Who are you talking about? Right? And that is a sign one that your person is actively engaging with you and answering the question, but also leading you to understand you are perhaps not answering the question in the way that they want. And so you have an opportunity to pivot and tweak, but staying focused on making sure you get to your results and what you would do differently in the future. I often find when I interview individuals that sometimes, especially in the day of AI and digital interviews as the first round, I've interviewed people that I can tell are reading from a script, and that's perhaps okay. Perhaps we all have nerves and we've prepared things, but it's becoming more and more common for companies to have rules related to generative AI in interviews and prompt their recruiters, their sourcing specialists to ask you some questions of, it looks like you're reading from a screen. I'm going to ask you a different question, right? So I want each of you to be prepared that companies are becoming more savvy about that. And so they might ask you some questions and additional prompts to really make sure you're able to thoughtfully provide answers that are specific and real. Any questions about preparing for the interview?
All of this is great. Thank you, Ashley. And I love the share. We tell the students all the time the STAR method, but I love seeing it played out this way as well.
So
So thank
STAR,
you.
stop, think, act, review.
Yeah, situation, task, action, result. And then if you're
Okay,
really getting creative, what you learned on it. But that's like a random E. So this one kind of reads a little bit easier to remember.
sure. Well, and STAR isn't necessarily wrong. I think the E, I like the E, right? Because a recruiter and interviewer is often going to ask, if you had the chance to do it over again, what would you do differently? Or perhaps said another way, what did you learn about this? So, you can preemptively answer their next question by saying, I learned that I thought I was a really strong collaborator, but I didn't provide enough time for people to respond, right? Like I didn't do these things. And so I think the next time I have an opportunity to do this, I would learn from that lesson. Um, Angel, I think I see your hand raised.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Oh, no, thank you for taking your time out of your day and um giving us this section. But my question is, when you're interviewing someone, what makes them stand out that, or what can what can we as a candidate do that instantly just show you as a recruiter that we did more than just read the company's website. And I know at the end, recruiters ask, "Oh, if you have any questions," and sometimes I have trouble just coming up with questions prior to it. Um, I just wanted to hear any feedback
Yeah.
within that.
I'm gonna flip this this next slide, I think having pre-written and prepared questions is really important. It's hard sometimes to come up with questions in the moment because sometimes a sign of perhaps a good interviewer sometimes is that they're answering questions for you as you go through the process, or they might start off by telling you a bit about the company, a bit about the role, the department. So some of your questions may already be answered as you go through. But I think it's always nice to have some of those like logistical questions listed out on paper with me on a padfolio. Even if I'm digitally interviewing with someone, like I don't think it's bad that the person sees like, okay, I have a notebook here. Let me just look at my prepared questions and indicate to that individual, yes, I have questions and I'm just going to take a look down here to orient myself to what I'd like to talk about next. In the case that they have, you know, done a nice job and told you a bit more about the company and the initiatives of the role, et cetera, I would always advise to write some future focused questions that are less likely to be answered in general conversation. So tell me a little bit about the strategy or the vision of the role of the department of the company over the next 3 to 5 years. Is there anything you can share with me about the strategic plan? For example, that is highly unlikely to come up in roles when you're not interviewing for executive type roles. So, you know, someone might be able to talk to you about the growth of the company and markets that they're moving into, or perhaps technology they're starting to embrace as a company and the trials and tribulations of that, right? So if you think of some future oriented corporation questions, you will always have something to ask. And then their response may generate more of a conversation of, oh, interesting. So in my internship, I noticed when we moved to XYZ location, we had these things come up that were issues. You know, have you guys thought about that and what would you do, right? You might have those opportunities to bring back your skill set and experience and make it relevant to what that organization is doing. To me, that's a slam dunk if that happens. Um, to answer the other part of your question, and if I've missed anything, please correct me. But so I'm both a recruiter, but I'm also a hiring manager myself. So to me, I of course am looking for people that match the skills of the role, but there's generally that X factor with applicants and candidates that's really exciting to me as a hiring manager. So I'm going to give you an example, and this isn't like, this is my opinion. When I'm meeting with someone and I ask them a thoughtful behavioral based question based off of their past experience, I'm looking for that excitement and energy of, oh my gosh, I was a project manager for this project and it was planned to go. When they start taking off with excitement about what they were doing, to me, that's that X factor of, can I continue to probe and ask questions? Are they exciting to me? Right? Is their excitement kind of contagious? You can tell their enthusiasm for their job. And generally, most people want to employ someone that loves what they do. When your job doesn't feel like work, your work is better, right? And that's actually proven. And so as someone starts to talk about something, I want to feel the enthusiasm, or I want to like understand something went critically wrong, right? It's okay to have bad examples as part of your interview because we all live in the real world. Every hiring manager, every recruiter, every person who's worked has worked on a project or an outcome that didn't go as planned. But if you're able to talk about that situation and say, gosh, it was a really hard day when I missed these deliverables and I had to have this critical conversation with my manager, but I was able to really sit down in my own time or the next day and think through, these 3 things went wrong. And perhaps if I had done this, or that, we would have ended up in a different place, or I could have impacted the outcome positively. Like to me, again, that's that X factor of this person is passionate about what they're doing. They're demonstrating to me they're interested, they're driven, they're excited. Your past behavior is your best predictor for your future outcomes, right? So I want to employ that person that's demonstrating, yes, it went wrong. What can I do to fix it? And being able to talk about it confidently, knowing nobody is perfect. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I saw one other hand, but let me move to the next page. I think I'm going to mispronounce your name. Agui?
Augie.
Oh, sorry. That's
You're good, don't worry.
terrible. My
You're good, don't worry.
apologies.
No worries. So I actually have two questions. One, so I saw that like most hirings come from networking, and so I think it was like 70%, something like that. So my first question is, how much does networking influence hiring decisions? And then my second question is, how important is LinkedIn in today's recruiting process? Because I know students and interns have like different types of LinkedIn activity, to like get noticed by recruiters. So I want to know like how important LinkedIn is.
Okay. So I'll answer your first question first. Networking and those personal connections, I think, are really important and helpful, but that is not the end all be all, right? We all, I mean, okay, so for me specifically, my first two jobs. So I've only worked at three employers since I graduated. I've stayed at each employer over 5 years. My first two roles, I didn't know a single person who worked there. I applied, I went to the interviews, I tried to bring my best self to those and sell them on me. Um, my third employer, actually where I work today, I didn't. It turns out when I joined my interviewer, I worked alongside the person who ended up interviewing me. So it's like this weird circumstance. And that happens sometimes. I think your personal and professional network can really help make some introductions, but that is not what's going to get you the job, right? So sometimes it makes a recruiter perhaps get your resume from an internal person that flips it across your desk versus through an applicant tracking system. But when those referrals come our way, you still have to meet the requirements. You still have to be a top talent as related to the position and the requirements. So sometimes it helps open the door a bit, but it's not going to get you the job in most cases. That being said, the world is a really small place, so I think it's incredibly important to never burn a bridge. And, those connections that you might have from someone at a restaurant, if you're looking to stay in your local community, people that you work with professionally, chances are you're going to bump into them again in your extensive careers moving forward. So always, making sure you're professional, polite, and providing feedback and commentary to people that you would be proud of 5 years from now, I think is definitely a best practice. To answer your question about LinkedIn, so I think LinkedIn is really important. I don't think it. Okay, so as a recruiter and a hiring manager myself, I get so many advertisements on LinkedIn that it's a less useful tool to me today than it used to be 5 years, 10 years ago. That wouldn't be necessarily everybody's experience, but every person who works for me on my team is getting spammed incessantly from staffing firms and organizations that want us to spend money with them. So, do I think you should have a LinkedIn? Yes. Do I think your content should be professional and well poised on LinkedIn? Yes, absolutely. Um, do I think recruiters perhaps may find you via LinkedIn? Sure. Um, but you're still going to need to be setting up agents in their job search, applying to jobs, etc., in order to find opportunities. Did that answer both of your questions, Augie?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Did I do a better job on your first name this time?
Yes.
I'm sorry about that. Are there any other questions? And if not, I'm happy to go to our.
Ashley, one question did come up, and I thought this was a good one. Morgan asked, did you feel like there are key differences between a one-on-one interview versus a panel interviewing, like with an organization, which many employers are doing, that students should consider as the candidate? What's your take on
Okay.
that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thanks for bringing that up. So generally speaking, I think like Gartner research would indicate that applicants prefer a one-to-one interview. And I think that's reasonable. You're fielding questions from one person, you're trying to establish a relationship with one person. I think panel interviews are far more common as companies and corporations are trying to decrease their hiring time. So panels, we can get more stakeholders involved in less time, so they're becoming more and more customary. Um, what I would always advocate anyone in preparation, because generally you're going to know you're going to have a panel interview, right? You're going to receive a meeting planner from a recruiter, a recruiting coordinator. You're going to see the individuals who are generally on the invitation. I think a couple things. You should look them up on LinkedIn or on the company page and figure out who it is you're meeting with and try to just get some insights. If their content is out there, you should use it. That's my opinion. I wouldn't necessarily pretend to be a subject matter expert about that person if you do find them on LinkedIn or social, for example. But again, to try to get an idea of who the people are that are interviewing you. And I would also really encourage like equal eye contact to all the participants, right? I think we have seen and I've experienced it, right? People spend more time with one person than the other, assuming they might be the decision maker if it's unclear or nebulous to you. And so seeking to understand really who it is in the room and treating everyone with your time and attention, your eye contact, looking at each of the participants to understand, like, did I answer your questions or do you have any follow-ups on this? I think is, key to making that interview for panels more successful. The other thing that I see in practicality today that is challenging for candidates is if you have a panel interview where some of your panelists are digital and you perhaps are an in-person interview with one person from the company. So you're looking between like a human who's with you and then people on the screen. That is a challenge. And I always appreciate a candidate that's willing to say, I'm looking over here and I'm looking over here to try to canvas if I'm catching everybody's attention. Are we good on that? Because depending on what type of conference room you're in, you don't own that building, you don't work in that building, you have no idea how their AV really works. And so just checking your sticks on, is everyone able to hear me? And did I answer that question is really the best that you can do in those circumstances.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. And I know we've hit the 1 o'clock time. So Ashley, we don't want to tie you up, but I'm willing to stay and
Yeah.
hear anything. And I would encourage interns, if you've got some additional questions, if Ashley, you're available to answer those. And just, it would really help us at Elevate if you guys can just complete the survey on this session, so we have feedback as well. And I can put the survey link in the chat as well for those of you that don't have cameras.
And I actually, I have the next, like 28 minutes free. So I'm happy to continue answering questions. If anybody has questions and wants to hang out and stay for a bit.
That's cool. We have had a couple more come through the chat. So one of them, Chloe asked, going back over the cover letter topic, how long should we generally spend on a cover letter, and what's your advice for identifying when writing a cover letter is worth the time?
Yeah. So, so okay, so with AI as it is today, and I think we should all use it because it's available and it does really help cut down the time. I would spend less than 15 minutes if I'm a confident professional writer on a cover letter, because generally after I read a posting or learn the location, I know my experience and want to call attention to two, maybe three things maximum. So you're not writing a long letter. You want it to be pithy, brief, clear, and, professional. AI will help you get there if you jot down some bullet points. But, things that I would caution you against is like trying to address it specifically to a person. I laugh, like, I get cover letters that are addressed to our CEO. To me, a CEO is not going to be reviewing it generally at most organizations, but you could say like to the hiring team, to hiring manager, right? Or in fact, the company representative, right? Uh, but I wouldn't spend an inordinate amount of time, but instead I would focus on finding companies I was really excited about and applying at large to those. Um, I don't think a cover letter is required in all cases, but sometimes it is helpful. So as you fill out an application, if, for example, because I'm an advocate of not putting your address on your resume, you don't want a recruiter to make choices on your behalf, right? Meaning, if this job is in person and it's 45 miles away from the residence that you provided to them and listed on the resume, you don't want them to make a decision of, oh, Ashley will never commute here. That's too far, right? So I like to leave that off. But your application does generally collect where you are. So if you know there's like a mismatch in the locations perhaps, or if you're applying to a role that is in a completely new industry, I think it is helpful to put why you're interested, right? Like, did you have some personal motivation that made you change industry, or, perhaps change your degree in college, and or you're perhaps personally relocating and so you want to call attention to, I look like I'm really far away, but in reality I'm moving in the next 2 weeks and I'm not, right? So in those cases, a cover letter also helps explain to someone why you're interested so you don't get accidentally dismissed for real reasons. Does that answer your question? I think that was Chloe's question.
She's asked a follow-up, and then I know Angel has another question. One more question: for how long is experience viable? If my
Yeah.
most relevant work experience is from a while back, is it better to put more recent experience?
So it really depends situationally on you and the job that you're applying for. So if you have experience from, let's say, 10 years ago that is directly aligned to the job you're applying for, you should include it for sure. But if it's, I see that. I'll use an example, and feel free to share your situation if you feel comfortable. But I've helped someone get a job recently personally who owned a landscaping business for like 10 years. It's hard to be a business owner, but he has been working professionally now for over 20 years. At this point, that business owner experience probably needs to fall off your resume so that you can focus on your industry related experience, and combined with not wanting that resume to get too long. So there's no absolute yes, correct answer or no incorrect answer, but instead, like, I think you have to assess situationally what's going on, what your experience is, and the industry that you're trying to move into. But if you're sacrificing pages that will not be seen by a recruiter, then you gotta delete it off, right? Like, you'd really want to keep it to one page. If you have to go to two, do it. But again, you have 10 seconds really to capture someone's attention to really start reading in depth more content. It sounds harsh, but I think that's the reality. So.
Angel, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah. So you spoke on LinkedIn and organizing and had making sense. I was wondering if you could elaborate in what ways can one do so. Just making a presence on LinkedIn and uh yeah.
I mean, so I think, joining community groups that are of interest to you so that you're following content that is going to help you grow and learn. And then you might have opportunities to make posts as they're related to you. I'm not a hugely active LinkedIn contributor, again, because I get just so much marketing material. But if you're trying to drum up interest and followers so that as you're looking for jobs, people who happen to land on your LinkedIn page can learn a little bit more about you, I think you should absolutely do so. I always think it's a good thing to celebrate on that social accomplishments that you've made that align to your professional goals. So whether it's if you're in school and you made the dean's list, put it out there. That is a good news story that should be celebrated, right? Um, if you're passionate about this not-for-profit that aligns with you want to work for a not-for-profit professionally, put it out there. That's a positive professional related content that will not hinder you in 5 years, right? But everything you put out there, you should be thinking, fast forward 5 years, is this going to support me in my endeavors or this is not? And that's true for other socials too, right? Because like corporations are now doing a lot of advertisements on like Instagram and TikTok. And I mean, we all probably look at that content, right? But if a recruiter who's placing ads on there sees your personal social, is that going to push you forward or hinder you, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
I
And
saw
and we're
someone.
really going to take all your 20 minutes because we have had another really good question, I
Yeah.
think.
I saw one come in that's about getting nervous. Is that the one that you?
Yes. Yeah. For the
Okay.
recording, I'm going to read it because I'm not sure it's going to
Oh,
come through if that's
sorry.
okay. No, 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 all
Sure.
good. When completing interviews, I generally get really nervous and I find that I look away and avoid eye contact when answering questions. Yet I feel my answers are generally good. Do recruiters see this as a negative in hiring someone, or do they understand that nerves play a factor for some people?
Okay. Great question. And so digitally, if you are doing a digital interview and you are not making eye contact with them, unfortunately, I think oftentimes we want people to be glass half full, right? Assume positive intent that they're nervous. But I have noticed people when I interview them, I can tell they're staring at themselves wherever that little box is on whatever platform. And it's like, no, look at me. You're talking to me, right? So if you are nervous, sometimes it's okay to say, I'm a little bit nervous and just break the ice, right? Like get it out there. You're dealing with people who also have interviewed and are also deal with their own nerves, right? So I don't see anything wrong with saying that. And perhaps just by saying that and being human for a second, you realize you are human and you can then position yourself to be a little bit more confident and then focus in on that person. But also practice makes perfect. So if you find you cannot make eye contact with them, get on a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting or a FaceTime and practice like your job depends on it, because it does, right? So force yourself to learn how to make eye contact and do it with a trusted person that will provide direct and honest feedback of, I noticed your eyes were just zooming around everywhere, right? Um, you can also record yourself, right? Like this day and age, it's so easy to film yourself and try to Like read a prompt and then make up your answer and watch where your eyes go so that you can really try to focus yourself on, yes, I want to talk and actively engage with this person. My one other trick, if nerves really are getting the better of you, um, again, kind of use my comment I made before of like, I have some notes in front of me and I'm just gonna, make a comment about that and force yourself to look down for a second. Take a deep breath, right? Position yourself and poise and then go back to them, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with you indicating that you're looking at a physical thing to just get yourself positioned to answer the question and then try to dive back in. And that also alerts the recruiter, I never feel like that's a bad thing, right? This person is so interested. They have notes about their experience. They've prepared for this. They have questions for me. That is all a positive. In person, um, if you have trouble making eye contact, try to look at their left eyebrow. Perhaps sounds weird, but it's like directly over their eye. It's not in the center of their eye, but because generally humans are looking at one eye or the other. We're not looking at both of them. We generally can't do that well, especially if people are close up. Find something right above one of their eyes and look at that. It will look like you're making eye contact with them. I'm not sure if that's helpful, but that's what I would recommend you do.
That's great advice, Ashley. And I think we tell students, interns all the time to pull out that notebook and say, I'm looking down. And it does. It definitely shows you've prepared, you brought information into the interview. And it also, though, gives you a chance to reset your nervous system, right?
Yeah.
So take that breath.
I would just want to add one thing to that. In previous sessions, I think I've shared sometimes repeating back the question to make sure, one, that you understood it, but two, to give your body a little bit of time to start thinking about what your answer might be and to take a deep breath and pause for a moment. It's just a moment and it may feel like a lot of time to you, but it won't feel like a lot of time to your interviewer. Your brain works so fast that taking a deep breath and grounding yourself just for a moment before you dive into that answer is okay.
Okay.
That is great. I think
Okay.
that's all the questions, Carolyn. I'll hand it over to you to do the wrap up.
Well,
Yeah,
may I
no,
just
that
say
was
one other thing? I'm so sorry, and I know I'm over time, but I have a number of other slides I created as an appendix to this presentation. I'd be happy to share them. It's like power verbs, interview process maps, internship data and analytics from Gartner, which is a really good. So I'd be happy to share that if it's of interest to the group that might get used.
Absolutely. If you
Okay.
send that to Carolyn, we'll get that out to everybody.
Yes.
That's
Okay.
excellent.
Wonderful. I'd be happy to
That
do
would
that.
be awesome. So thank you. As you can tell from the questions, what a great session, Ashley. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. And I love the beginning, like what is the job market like right now? I think it's really important because you emphasize that preparation is key. And how can you be fully prepared if you don't know what the environment is that you're going into? So thank you for kicking off with that. I think that was really, really helpful. So again, every interns, I will be sharing the slide deck and the recording out. And if you have any questions, please feel free to get them to us. And Ashley, I'm going to encourage the interns to connect with you on LinkedIn, if you don't mind. So that's great. We've included your LinkedIn profile in the original invite. So we want to keep those connections growing. And thank you again for a very informative presentation. And we look forward to welcoming you back next year.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you so much. I hope it was helpful. Best of luck to all of you.
Thank you,
Take
Ashley. That was
care.
awesome.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye.
one.
Thank you. I'm going.